Joining me now is Republican Congressman Jeb Hensarling of Texas. He is chairman of the House Republican Conference and vice chairman of the Financial Services Committee. Congressman, good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
So, kicking the can down the road, playing chicken, holding the American economy hostage. Are we really going to go through this again?
Well, here's what I know. I mean, the American people know at some point you got to quit spending money you don't have. We have a legitimate debt crisis. I mean, under the president, this nation has racked up more debt in 3 years than in the previous 200 on a nominal basis. We have serial trillion-dollar deficits. Not only is it unsustainable, I think the American people think it's immoral to be borrowing roughly 40 cents on the dollar, much it from the Chinese, and sending the bill to our children and our grandchildren. It's a threat to our national security, our economic opportunity, and clearly our children's future. And so the Speaker says, you know what? We're not going to do business as usual in Washington. And we applauded his leadership for the first time when we said, you know what, the debt ceiling is not something to be ignored. It is an opportunity to put reforms in place so that we can live within our means. And that's what the American people expect. They don't want business as usual, and that's what we're hearing out of the White House.
It still sounds to me like we heard last year that both parties are standing their ground. One side says, spending cuts. One side says, no increase in revenue. And when you look at sort of the temporary compromise that was reached last year, let's look at the results, because when you look at the approval here, sir, CNN ORC poll taken last August, this is after the House passed the debt ceiling deal, found a majority, 68% of people disapproved of how specifically Republican leaders in Congress handled that whole debacle. That's a pretty big number, sir, 68%. We are in an election year. How afraid are you that could hurt your party come November?
Well, let me give you two other big numbers. $5 trillion of debt that the president has added to the national debt, $11 trillion more of debt that he plans to add on. I mean, when people look at your network and other networks and see what's going on in Greece, I think they're waking up to the fact that if we don't get our fiscal house in order, what we're seeing overseas one day we may see here. And so, again, regardless of what today's polling data or yesterday's polling data may show, again, the American people want us to live within our means. And so Republicans have put forward a budget that, frankly, will grow government each and every year, but it makes sure that the family budget doesn't go broke trying to pay for the federal budget, and that we don't cheat our children. I mean, the American people want to make sure our children have a better life.
I understand.
We want small business people to be able to grow their businesses, and they're not going to do it when the president's threatening the single largest tax increase in American history, much of it to fall on small businesses.
I want to bring in another voice, Will Cain.
Congressman Hensarling, this is Will Cain. Listen, I think, as many viewers know, I agree with a lot of what you have to say, especially on the goals, that we need to get spending cuts in order, that we can't have business as usual. But where I must take you to task is on the tool, this concept of holding the debt ceiling hostage. As you talk about the fragile debt market in Europe and around the world, how does it make sense for the United States to put our full faith and credit, our promise to pay our own debts that we've already committed to, on the line to get what does amount to a good goal in the end, cutting spending? I just don't understand how this is a justifiable tool.
Well, again, Will, number one, as you well know, if you look at the cash flow, there is more than enough cash flow to ensure that our sovereign debt is paid. That's not the issue. What is the issue is, are we going to do business as usual? Otherwise, why do we even have a debt ceiling? Why don't we ignore it? Ultimately, our credit rating is threatened by the fact that we continue to borrow roughly 40 cents on the dollar, much of it from the Chinese, and we're sending the bill to our children and our grandchildren. Why don't we embrace this as an opportunity to make sure that we do what every other family and every other small business in America does, and that is put our fiscal house in order?
Because it threatens the debt markets.
Is a red herring. That is a complete red herring.
What is?
And I think you know it. It's a red herring. The only way that our sovereign debt would be compromised is if the president and the Treasury chose not to pay it.
Don't you think the debt markets looked at what we did over the summer and said, wow, I'm not so sure in the United States all of a sudden? Don't you think we sent jitters throughout the debt market?
The real jitters come from the fact that, again, we have racked up more debt in 3 years than in the previous 200. It is unsustainable. We have to do something about it. We have to do something about it today. You know, the threat in our credit rating doesn't come from a debate over a debt ceiling vote. It comes from the fact that we are spending money we don't have. and we're doing it at a historic rate that by historic standards, again, shows that countries will be compromised. If you look at the history of economies over the last 200 years, when their debt exceeds 90% of their GDP, they start to decline. And that's where we are in America today.
Let me jump in. Go ahead, Mark.
Because I think part of
move, and we need to move today.
No, Congressman, I think part of what Will's concern is that it seems to me that there is a commitment to compromising our economic well-being, partly for a political show. And I think part of
theater.
It's all theater. And what we saw yesterday was another example of that. Your Senate colleagues spent the entire day making fake budgets and voting them down strictly for the purpose of being able to attack the president. I mean, at what point do we stop with the political show and we develop an actual budget that makes sense?
When you talk about political showmanship, the president's budget got 0 votes in the Senate. Now, the Democrats control the Senate. So you need to talk to them about political showmanship. We're trying to solve the problem here. And when it comes to being able to compromise and compromise on policies, as a member of the super committee, even though it's against my principles and policies, I was willing to put tax increases on the table, something Democrats demanded. And we Republicans unified around the plan. The Democrats never put a plan on the table. They said nothing short of $1 trillion tax increase.
Your head.
And they refused to engage in any kind of meaningful entitlement reform. That's well documented, and I think you know it.
No, I think there's a fair critique of Democrats. First of all, Democrats shot down the plan not because they disagree with the president's principles, but for very technical reasons. Like, for example, the budget was old, the numbers were wrong. I mean, it's disingenuous to suggest that they did something.
You may believe that. I don't think the American people do.
Well, it's the truth. It's the truth. Even Democrats themselves said that. But I think there's a bigger question here, which I'm not sure you answered respectfully, and that is, at what point do we actually produce something tangible for us to vote on? And that's a bipartisan question, quite frankly.
Well, again, I think the House Republican budget does it. I mean, we actually balance the budget. We put America on a sustainable fiscal path, and we continue to grow government, but we do it by prioritizing and living within our means. We get a tax code that's fairer, flatter, simpler, more competitive to create economic growth. And so I think we've done it. What we haven't seen, as you well know, Democrats in the Senate haven't even passed a budget in the last 3 years. I mean, apparently they don't even want a speed bump on the road to national bankruptcy. We have done our part. We're looking for a partner.
I think I would agree that no matter what side of the line you're on, Americans want solutions, and perhaps it will need to happen this year. Congressman Jeb Hensarling, I appreciate it. Congressman, Republican
Thank you.
of Texas. Appreciate it, sir.